One moment, please. Hi, my name is Lisa Lynn, and I'm the secretary at NCSA, and I'm another Bajan.
I'm Aldra Ashton, clerical officer.
I'm Agnetha Rhodes Chase, clerk typist.
I am Troy Wickham, deputy manager.
I'm Laura Foster, research and information officer.
I'm Cindy Bennett, receptionist.
I'm James Iville, driver messenger.
I'm Curtis Sellers, accountant.
I'm Natalia Carby Eiffel, senior counselor.
I'm Timothy Eiffel, information technology officer.
I'm Stephen Bishop, assistant accountant.
Hi, I'm Paula Beth Atkinson, substance abuse prevention officer with the National Council on Substance Abuse.
I'm Cheryl Osborne, office attendant.
I'm Betty Hunt, manager at the National Council on Substance Abuse, and I'm another Bajan.
And I'm another Bajan.
I'm another Bajan.
I'm another Bajan.
And I'm another Bajan.
And I'm another Bajan.
And I'm another Bajan.
I'm another Bajan.
And I'm another Bajan.
Hi, I'm Mark Maynard. I'm another Bajan. I was born in Barbados, and I was born in Barbados at a time when life was really simple and easy. Late 40s, right after the war, I'm told. I don't know anything about the war. And then I grew up throughout the 50s in Black Rock, having a wonderful childhood, almost idyllic childhood, I would say. It was probably the last days of horse and horse and carts and stuff like that. And so it was like a period that was changing, but really enjoyable. Like, we could run wherever we want, we could go out for hours, and our parents never really checked on us, except that I think they checked on us through the neighbors and so on. Somebody was keeping tabs on us and saying, maybe we just saw your boys pass there or whatever, right? And there were a lot of kids around at the time, so there were always a bunch of young boys running around, getting into trouble and hopefully getting out of trouble too. And it was really wonderful. I lived there until I was about 12 years old. Then I moved to Tudor Bridge, Eagle Hall area, and that was even better. We moved into a big old house that, I don't know, my father bought this house and renovated it. It was like a real dump. At first when we walked into it, it was like, what is this? But then he fixed it up and it was really, really, really nice. And we grew up there all through my teenage years. And that was really, really enjoyable. Went to school at two small private schools. So I don't know anything about government schools. I don't know anything about growing up in a chattel house. So I can't tell that really nice story that people tell. I was born in a chattel house and blah, blah, blah. No, I wasn't born in a chattel house. I was born in a big house, fairly big house with. There were 6 of us all together, kids, and my mom, my dad, and my grandmother, who was she was a nurse. She was a nurse at what was then the Alms House Geriatric Hospital. She became, I think, assistant matron and all that. But essentially, she was a midwife, and she was the midwife throughout Black Rock also. And I had a lot of relatives all around me, like relatives down Deacon's Road. My great-grandmother lived down Deacon's Road and would come up every Saturday for cuckoo, although she was in her 90s, and aunts, great aunts down there. And then I had cousins all along the street, so we would be in and out of each other's houses all day long, having fun. And from there I went to Harrison College. Big step. I literally sat down my first day at Harrison College looking at this big field of grass and saying, wow, right? And I couldn't wait to get out there and run on that grass. And then I discovered that I could actually run. I mean, I could actually run fast, and so that was a opening up of another chapter of my life altogether. Although my sisters tell me that the first year that I ran at sports, they came to see me and I came last in everything. Yes, I did. and I was the smallest, so everybody could see you. And then I grew to be a little bigger and was then able to compete because everybody was bigger than me, so they would beat me. And then I grew stronger and learned that I could run and I could jump and I could do all these different things. And eventually I ended up being like athletics captain at Harrison College and ran for Harrison College and Barbados eventually, representing Barbados nationally and internationally sometimes. And but at the same time, I was fairly good academically. I think I remember coming first in class sometime way back, second form or something like that. And that catapulted me through school pretty easily without any worries as such. And then I discovered that I was to become a lawyer, according to my parents. I had the misfortune of having a sister who was the first female lawyer in Barbados, so off to law you must go. It didn't bother me much. I thought, cool, law, I think I could handle law. But then I could handle law in terms of law books. I liked that, but lawyers, I wasn't sure about what it was like to be a lawyer all your life. And throughout all of this, they tell me that I used to draw all over the books in school that I had. And I do remember like making a little money when I was at school, drawing illustrations in a biology class for the other guys and getting $2 and $3 for each drawing. So I was sent off to a solicitor's office, which back then was basically a law office, and I went there for like 2 years, and then I was one of the inaugural students in the law school at Cave Hill UE, right, along with people like our president and Justice Kentish and people like that, whom you might know, and then one day something strange happened to me. I used to be drawing a lot then too, and there's this guy who I knew him when he was young growing up, and he and his family had gone off to New York to live, and he came home a summer, saw my drawings, and he said, you should I'm at this art school, you should really come and go to school there because these drawings look good. And I was like, yeah, right, okay. And then I went and checked on this art school, seemed like probably one of the best art schools in the world. Well, having gone there now, I know it is one of the best art schools in the world. It's called the Pratt Institute, but I didn't really think that I could get into any American New York art school. But he said, yeah, next thing I know, he organized for me to receive a home exam. So I had like 6 weeks to do this home exam, and did it and got accepted at the school. It was a bit strange because I think it was an election year and the results came in late, so too late for me to be able to get into school in September. But I thought, well, art school, wow. So I came home and I told my parents that I want to go to art school, and my father looked at me and said, and how are you going to eat? And but other than that, they were like, we would prefer if he's a lawyer, but if that's what he wants, kind of attitude, right? And so I went off from there to art school, well, I went off to New York, and I spent from about October of that year until January when I went into art school and did all the courses backwards, 102 before 101 and such like that. But an unusual thing happened back then. This was like late 60s, very late 60s, 1970. And it was about that time that marijuana was introduced to Barbados. Now I say that and people really don't know, because if you were not smoking marijuana in 1970 in Barbados, you would not even know that it was there. I don't think they had any laws on the books about it. And the guys that I hung out with were either studying law or studying medicine or something. And there was this one Jamaican guy who who was a doctor. He was actually an intern, I think. A really bright guy. And I say really bright. When I say really bright, I should explain that. He was at, I think it's Edinburgh in Scotland, topped the class, and he wasn't allowed to graduate because he had like a huge afro. And of course, his peers didn't allow it, right? So he went back with a haircut, topped the class again, and he was living in Barbados, but he was Jamaican as a intern, or maybe more than that. He was like under the tutelage of this renowned surgeon, and he later became a renowned surgeon himself. But he would get a shipment of marijuana every Friday coming in, and he introduced us to it. I think I had been introduced to it before by somebody, but I wasn't really interested. But then we would just imbibe on Friday nights. Police would come by and say, "Is everything okay, doc?" Blah blah blah, and the house would be just full of smoke, and they wouldn't have a clue. But so I went off to New York, having been introduced to drugs already. And New York is like New York. So I was at art school, doing pretty good and everything, but there was always, in the background, there was always like smoking and this thing or that thing, a few other esoteric things like mandrax and chemicals, you know. And so I got into drugs and got through, and there were periods of like depression, which I think, looking back on it now, were brought on by drug taking. And I finished school, came back to Barbados, went off to Canada, and then in Toronto I was like really introduced to cocaine. That's powder cocaine that you would snort up your nose. Came back to Barbados, that was around 1980, and somewhere between 1980 and 82, really got into all kinds of drugs. I mean, things like joy juice, which you will hear only drug people talking about, which is a hallucinogenic, and not a mild hallucinogenic either. And we would be in basically what was a crack house, and my friends were druggies, but I was working all the way through it, so I was what they call a functional addict. And having in my later years sat on the board of the National Council on Substance Abuse, I know what a functioning addict is. But so I would describe myself as a functional addict. I was at that time, because I had gone to art school, came back to Barbados. It was kind of strange at first. My parents were like, somebody comes to the house, it was like, you'll have to excuse him, he's an artist kind of thing. And then I won all kinds of awards, NIFCA and all that, and it was suddenly our son the artist. And it evolved out of that. Then I started doing theater. I should tell you the theater story. The theater story is interesting. When I was was a Christmas, I think, I was leaving to come home, and I went to an art exhibition in Brooklyn, and there I bounced up on a Barbadian guy, and I have to be really thankful for him. He never even knew what he had done. He had gone to foundation. He was like a writer. He used to write poetry. He used to be on radio Saturday mornings. Very, very creative guy. And he told me he was doing a production, a play off Broadway. Right? And he said, so Mark, I've been looking all about for you, and I need you to do the stage for me. I'm bringing this production home next summer, and would you do the stage for me? And I was like, stage? I don't know anything about stages, but of course I said yes, because I was at that age when a challenge was a challenge, and actually I still do that, but I took up the challenge, but I actually forgot all about it. Honestly, I came back home, and incidentally I did some staging. Didn't have to do much. A friend of ours had promised a renowned singer who had gone into Glenderry that he would help him out when he got out. So he got us all together, and we got together and decided that we would produce 2 shows for this guy. And we did 2 shows back to back at the Globe Cinema, one in like matinee and then straight into the other. And it was a friend of mine who was an architect, one who was a surveyor, and others who had other skills that were handy. And we decided that we would stage the show. The architect decided that we would use scaffolding because that's what was available to him. And I decided that, well, scaffolding doesn't really look good on stage, so how about if we wrap all the scaffolding in kitchen foil? And so we wrapped it. We had like maybe 2 or 3 stories of it on stage, and we wrapped it. And I had done sometime before that, I had done a costume for a girl for one of those Queen shows, and found myself playing around with foil and making roses out of it, and we did a whole costume out of that. So we decided we would do like a wisteria kind of thing around the scaffolding of flowers and so on, all in silver. And that's what we did, and the show was a big success. And so then by the summer comes around now, and somebody turns up at my apartment and says, oh, Paul sent this this stuff for you to create the staging with for the show. He's going to be home in 3 weeks time. And after I went into my panic, then I decided, well, at least I know how to paint it. Fortunately, the increments were built, so I didn't have to do any construction or anything like that. And I was painting it, and then they said, okay, we have to now transfer everything. The show is coming in, we have to transfer everything to Commonwealth School. So we go down to Commonwealth School, and I'm finishing up the painting, and a young guy turns up one afternoon, and he looks at me and he says to me, hi, Earl Warner sent me to help you. And I said, so who is Earl Warner? Now, if you know anything about theater, you'll know that Earl Warner became like the biggest name in theater in Barbados and film in Jamaica and all that. And turns out I had seen some of Earl Warner's work. The summer before, when I was home at UE, there was a production there called Pablo and Jojo, and I had seen that. So then I found out who Earl Warner was, and the guy who came to help me was none other than Dorsey Boyce, who is like the very successful owner of a company that produces theater in Barbados. No, well, he is the theater producer in Barbados. And so we worked on the show. It was fun. I found out that when you work like that, you have to eat and you have to drink. And I found out that the hard way, because I was laid out flat on my back, unconscious, and woke up with a doctor over me. And I was dehydrated. So they gave me two yellow juices or something like that to drink, and I was good again. But then there was a problem. So we're doing this stuff, and I say to the guy who came to help me, I said, yeah, but how are we going to get these things to stand up on stage? And he goes, well, that's not a problem. You do the old Elizabethan method. And I say, yeah, that sounds good, the old Elizabethan method. I had no clue what that was. But he said, okay, we need to get them to buy us some fairly large nails. We put them in the back. We put 2 L's on the 2 ends, and we laced them up with rope, and boom, they're going to stand up. So that's what we did, and that was my introduction to theater, thanks to a guy called Paul Webster, the late Paul Webster, who literally thrust me into theater. And as a result of that, I ended up being a theater practitioner, which I am up until this late stage in my life, right? So that's how it went. In the meantime, drugs. Drugs were happening a lot. Drugs were happening all the time, regularly. And eventually, I started getting the effects of being on drugs for a long period of time. And I lapsed into serious stages of drug taking, especially between 1980 and 82. There was a girl who turned up one day and one night, I should say, and she introduced us to she taught us how to cook cocaine. That is how to transfer it from being a powder into crack cocaine, or what was then known as rocks. And so that is highly addictive. And by 1982, I was really in bad shape, down to 117 pounds, still working, and depressed. Suffering. I tried to come off of drugs on my own, so I was suffering from withdrawal symptoms. I found out later at the same time. So I went to see this friend of mine who went to school with me at Harrison College, who was a psychiatrist. So I said, hey guy, I'm going through a thing here, and he put me on, I never remember if it's Valium or Valium, because I didn't stay with it for too long. I actually took 2 doses of it. And I was going through a period then where I was about to move house. I was staying by my parents for a while as I changed from one address to another. And I was like sitting there wondering what to do with my life because of the depression. I was like fairly suicidal. Feeling sick, feeling really terrible, wondering if to put myself into a hospital, the psychiatric hospital, or a grave. Basically, that's what it had come down to. And while that was going on, I had an experience with Jesus Christ. And the next thing I know, I was telling my mother, Jesus wants me to minister for him. I just met Jesus. And of course she looked at me and asked me if I was smoking ganja again, which I hadn't done for quite a while actually. And that was that. I went to church that evening, and I've been like born again Christian ever since that, back in 1982 when that happened. And it was like a really difficult period. Coming off of drugs is not an easy thing. Withdrawal symptoms went on for like a year and a half. Not sleeping. I hadn't really slept for years. and I would like sleep half of a night in one bed, soak it. All the toxins would be coming out of my body because I wasn't doing drugs anymore, and then I'd sleep on another bed, and by morning that would be soaked too. And so I would exchange them as we go through the nights. And interesting thing happened with that psychiatrist friend of mine. He, I remember him in a very professional way when I went to see him. I told him, well, I met Jesus Christ, so I really don't need to come to you anymore. You know, everything is good. I'm good now. And he looked at me and he said, just like this, he put his hand on his face and he said, okay, if that works for you. Right. Interesting story about that is about 7 years later, he had a similar experience and also became born again. Right. So it's like, that was such a joy when I met him and saw that he was like from psychiatrist, probably atheist, I think, and to what he was. And that's how my life has gone ever since then. Where drug usage is concerned, there's no... I'm also a writer. I wrote like a Christian living column for one of our local newspapers for several years, and one of the pieces I wrote was called "Drugs the Succubus," and I wrote that because of the virulent nature of drugs on your body. As I said, I was weighing 117 pounds. 117 pounds is like weighing nothing. I did, because I was small when I was young, want to be a jockey, but I couldn't because I was too heavy, and 117 pounds was lighter than that, for sure. And but my first negative experience with drugs was in a club one night in New York in the middle of the winter. Ice storm outside, and this guy, American guy, knew him from the club. He was passing around what we call spliffs, and they call joints, and it was a little teeny thing, and I took a few tokes from it, and that must have been about midnight. I was there with my roommate from university, who had a car. He was originally Trinidadian but had grown up in America. And I remember going to the bathroom, and then I heard him saying, "Mark, get up, get up, get up." And I was laid out on the bathroom floor. And it was actually 3 hours later. And that was my first understanding of drugs being something that you don't really want to be playing around with. Another story, another drug story that happened when I really got into a lot of different drugs then, especially there's this plant that grows wild in Barbados, which is called, we call it joy juice. Is really called, of course I went and checked on it and did all the research on it, and its real name is Datura. Deadly nightshade is another name for it, and it's a poisonous plant. The pods grow, I mean, people don't even realize it's growing around. It grows especially in dry areas like St. Philip. It's a pod with prickles on it, and me and the guys I hung out with, and some girls were there too, I remember, we drank it one night, and we were also smoking marijuana. So we were all, at least I was saying, oh, this is such a waste of time. So somebody must be trying to like pull a trick on us because nothing is happening. And I said, oh, forget it, I'm going to bed. And I went to bed, and sometime in the morning, maybe about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up in the bed, standing on the bed when I woke up, and feeling a bit strange. And one of the odd ways that I was feeling was that my mouth was completely dry. And I said, okay, so I'm going to have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to have to get a glass of water or something like that. And I'm in the dark. So I sit on the bed, and when I sit on the bed and my feet touch the ground, the soles of my feet felt like cat's paws, like the soles of a cat's feet, right? Now, how would I know what the soles of a cat's feet feel like? Except for the fact that I was hallucinating. And so I'm sitting there and I say, okay, let me get myself, this is like a real serious high. Let me get my act together, go to the bathroom. And I don't think I have ever told this story publicly, right? And fix myself up and see how I am in the morning. So, as I am thinking that, through the wall to my right come like a galloping bunch of animals like out of Africa. And this was before I saw Jumanji, right? And they came flying through the room. I had to like jack my knees up and on the bed to let them pass through, and they went all the way through. And like as they went out of the other wall, I was like, wow, okay, so this is what's going on. Let me go to the bathroom. This is all happening in the dark. I get up and I try to make my way down the corridor, because the bathroom is at the end of the corridor. And I put my hand on the walls to steady me, but the walls are like a Ferris wheel, but sideways. And then I realized that the floor is also like a Ferris wheel. And so I kind of like make my way down and I go into the bathroom. And as I am getting further down the corridor, I said, I should turn on the lights and see what's going on. And I put my hand on the light switch, and who tell me do that? With the speed that the light came on, the floor in the corridor came right up to my face and went back down. And I turned the light back off. Made my way down to the bathroom, turned the lights on in the bathroom, and discovered that I had double vision. So I said, let me clean my teeth, and there was Colgate sitting here and Colgate sitting under it on the Colgate toothpaste, and everything else was double vision. So I cleaned my teeth and I came back to bed and sat there. A few more visual, excited incidents happened, and I got up the morning and one of the other things that happened was when I went into the bathroom, I could see like a purple aura coming off my skin. And so the next morning, we're sitting there, the people who live in the house along with me, and we hear this car coming up the road, but it's like laboring. The engine is like laboring, right? And there's a girl who was there with us the night before who drank it, and apparently she had driven all the way from home over to our house in first gear. And she jumped out of the car and she said, Mark, look, I'm orange. I said, no, you're not really orange. Last night I was purple, and it's gonna go away after a while. And so that went on for like the whole of the next day and maybe into the night. And then I knew that that kind of like got me into saying, you have to take stock of your life and find out what's really going on, because this can't go on. And a friend of mine, sometime around that time, she said to me, Mark, you are losing a lot of weight. You're getting really skinny. And I hadn't really noticed it, tell you the truth. It was that period when there was a roller skating fad going on in Barbados, and I would be in the roller skating rink every night. So I was literally fit. But I went home one night after roller skating, stood in front of a mirror and decided to do some exercises, some stretching. And as I stretched, I heard a hissing noise in my chest. went to the doctor, found out that I was like walking around with bronchitis for quite a while. And it was at that period of time, coming out of that I had the epiphany with Jesus Christ. And so that was like, I can't be doing drugs forever, gotta get out of this. But trying to get out of it, I actually, when I had stopped doing, I stopped doing crack cocaine first, and then marijuana. Hardest thing for me to give up, honestly speaking, of all drugs, and I'm saying drugs meaningfully, was tobacco in terms of addiction. And but I remember going home one night and smoking a particularly strong set of marijuana, and I was walking in the garden and a voice said to me, go for a walk, start walking. And I was almost about to start walking, and then another voice said, Mark, if you walk from here tonight, you're going to end up in Oistins and you are going to be walking for the rest of your life. And I kind of think, like, you know, you see, I see friends of mine on the street who are street characters who were doing drugs with me previously, and I think maybe they started walking, you know. But that other voice that came to me, I suppose, was sent from the Lord, and that's kept me that night. And then around that same time, that interaction with the Lord happened, and that's how I came off of drugs. So I literally was not in rehabilitation or anything. I did meet this wonderful lady at church who was a psychologist. She was Canadian, and so she was like a Christian psychologist, and she lived in Bathsheba, right on the beach by Tent Bay. And she said, well, come and visit me on Tuesdays. We have Bible school after, but you can come like in the afternoon and just talk. And I would go up there, and I started talking, but I ended up bawling. I would like cry. All the stuff would be coming out of me. Whether it was guilt or what, I don't know, but it was like an expiation that happened to me over that period of time. And gradually then I came back into a better physical condition, started running on the street to get back healthy, and the next thing I know, I was running 10Ks in competition for the independence celebration and all that, those Run Barbados things. And so God has been good to me. But here's the thing, when I came to the Lord, you know, He took me to He gave me a scripture, and the scripture that the Lord gave me was Joel chapter 2 verse 25. I shall return to you the years that were lost to the cankerworm and the palmer worm and the devouring locust. And literally that is what has happened in my life. Literally. I mean, I'm pretty old now, but people hardly ever believe that I am the age I am. And of course now I still run track, I run senior games and all that. So He has literally returned the years that were lost. Within 10 years of coming to Christ out of drugs, I was a manager at one of the top companies in Barbados, and at the same time theater production and all that going on also. So I then became an artist. My profession, my major at university was art direction, which encompasses graphic arts and illustration. As a matter of fact, I did illustration as a minor and art direction as a major. And so I was able to work for advertising agencies and graphic art studios, and people like that came up through them. I also spent a lot of time freelancing. and at the same time doing the theatrical stuff. Produced not just theater on stage, but we did shows. We did, I remember 1974 we did a stage. I think they were just introducing crop over into Barbados then. We did it was for the tourist board or somebody like that. I did my first really big stage, and so that taught me how to paint large, and I had some experience with it at school. There was this wonderful art teacher who would let us, we would paper the walls of the room with brown paper, and the models would be in the middle of the room, and we would paint them, draw them large because it was on the walls. And that also led me into becoming not just an artist, a graphic artist, fine artist, painting, but also to become a muralist. And so I, over the years, expanded my skill set widely, and I think that's the basis of my survival as an artist, that I had a really broad base skill set. And so it would be theater, it would be painting, it would be working in graphic arts, and really in advertising, because I had done art direction, which meant training for print, radio and television. And that basically is how my life has gone. I ended up doing stages. Cary Festa 81 was like a watershed year, and we learned a lot of stuff, and worked really hard doing a lot of different stuff too, national productions for Barbados and such like, with the original Earl Warner, who I had met back in 1976 or so, and we actually became, Earl Warren and I became, we were roommates at one stage up to when we did Cary Festa 81. So I learned a lot from him. Had no idea where he learned all this stuff on theater from. He was a Parkinson boy, and somehow he knew all this stuff. He had lots of books in his house, yes, but the next thing I know is he had me on stage acting. Which was good for me, because throughout all of this, all the talk and everything, I was still a very shy person. And I think acting brought me out of myself. And now, of course, nowadays I talk too much, but that's how I got out of being shy. And so I did acting, loved acting, but then the technical side of it became so demanding that I had to stop acting, and found myself doing makeup, costume, staging, all of that up until in recent times now. I found myself in recent years doing set decoration for film and television, and artistic designer for film, which is a really exciting part of my life, which I wish I were younger, because it's so physically demanding that I'm reaching that stage where do I continue doing it? Am I able? Will this be the last one I do? That's how I was feeling at the end of last year when I did NIFCA. I did the staging for the NIFCA Gala, and I was like, is this going to be the last one that I do? Because this is getting to be really, really challenging physically. So I'm thrashing around now to find out how technically and in terms of whatever is the latest technology, I can find ways to produce the same stuff that I would do physically, but without doing anything physical. So I hope I can get that done over this year and next year or so. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go out to pasture if I can. Basically, that's my life, and I went to a church which I still go to, but I had left that church for about 7 years, and in that period of time, I got involved then with missions and doing missionary work, going down into the jungles of Guyana, which is a whole other story altogether. But that's my life. Essentially, that's what my life is now. I've been married to a wonderful woman for the last 40, almost 41 years, 41 this month actually. And reason I actually when I wanted to go to church that time with the drug, the epiphany with Jesus Christ, she was the only person I know who used to go to church, or at least I think she used to go to church. And so I had called her up and said, I need to go to church. And she said, it was a Wednesday. She said, well, you can come on Friday, right? Friday at church is like, for people like how I was, the druggies and thing, it's deliverance. Right? So I explained to her, no, I don't really need that. I met Jesus Christ. I just want to come to church. And so it turns out that I eventually got married to that lady, and still am. And we have gone out and done missions together and stuff like that. Very exciting, very adventurous. I think it's madness, but I guess I'm crazy for Jesus. I had this girl that I had known. We literally grew up as, when I say kids, I mean kids, like 4 or 5 years old. And her family, and I knew her family well. And years after I came off of drugs, she looked at me one day and she said, you know, Mark, I was really worried about you, but I didn't know what to say to you. And in my mind, I was saying, well, you could have told me that you're doing bare foolishness, you need to stop doing it. But I understood what she was saying, right? And the truth is, when I went back to church, right, I saw babies and kids and stuff, and it hit me one day that I had not been around children or babies for years, because my days and nights were spent either working or in the crack house or in some drug hole. And that was, the thing is, if you were in those places, you will be in the company of criminals. So I knew some criminals. I don't want to talk about that too much. I really don't want to talk about that too much because it overlaps other things that I don't want to talk about. But that was how it was. So I had literally 2 sets of friends and acquaintances, one on one side of the law, others on the other side of the law. And a lot of people didn't seem to understand what was going on with me. You know, they thought, well, I was pretty cool. I was winning awards and all that, still winning crop over, costume band competitions and all that. So people thought I was pretty fine on one hand, and other people who would have known better knew that I was going through a lot of stuff. Let me say this. If you have, there are people out there who have gone through drugs, and I have a friend who, a late friend, who I know he went through a lot. He went through as much as me or more with drugs. The reason I know that is because he was basically my dealer. He's the one who used to supply me with drugs. And he became born again, you know, and his whole life changed. Excellent stuff happened to him. But he never, ever talked about what he went through when he was doing drugs. He never talked about it. He never talked about it as testimony or anything. Well, kind of as testimony, he would say, well, I used to be on drugs, but I'm good now, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important to talk it out. One of the things that really was excellent for me was that, I went to schools to talk about drugs. I went to social centers to talk about drugs. Somebody even hooked up with a sponsor and would like supply me with a stipend to go out and talk in schools and places like that. And the good thing about that was that Barbados is a small country. People talk about you. People say things about you that are probably not true. Some things might be true, but I placed myself in a position. I went on television and talked about drugs. my drug life, and it placed me in a position where nobody could like point their finger at me and say, well, you used to be this or you used to be that. Yeah, I used to be that, and everybody knows it. The whole world knows it now, right? And so I think you need to open yourself up. Once you open yourself up, then you can help others. So I ended up then being a counselor, teen challenge counselor, helping people. In recent years, I don't, if somebody calls me and tells me they want me to talk to their son or daughter or whatever, I usually put them on to a professional. And for many years, I was on the board of the NCSA, National Council on Substance Abuse. And I don't know if you understand the irony of that, but here was this former drug addict, and thanks to the CEO, who was the one who negotiated and established for me to sit on the board, I was able to do stuff that would have been unimaginable to me, because I don't think people in Barbados understand the amazing work that is done at the NCSA where drug intervention is concerned. And I was a part of that for many years, up until I think year before last, when I resigned. I'm Mark Maynard. I'm a recovered addict. I am a senior athlete. I am an artist, and I am another Bajan.